Hello, hello, hello. Can everybody hear me? Hello? Can folks hear me in the back? Awesome. Welcome. So we're just waiting for a few more people to walk in. So this is the Empowering Future Leaders BIPOC Mentorship for a nonprofit. My name is Jonathan Castro. I'm the Senior Director at Jericho Project. I oversee the veteran and young adult supportive housing programs, as well as horticultural therapy. And I'll be moderating today's panel. And it's my pleasure to introduce our panel today. So we have first Tania Capaz Topping, who serves as the Executive Director of Somos, Inc., a nonprofit organization dedicated to addressing the needs of the Hispanic community in collaboration with New York State, Puerto Rican, and Hispanic Assembly Senate Task Force. As the first woman to hold the position at Somos, she has been instrumental in driving the organization's mission with a forward-thinking approach. In addition to her work in Somos, Tania has a rich background in academia, having worked in student life and academic counseling within opportunity programs in the college level. This experience has equipped her with a unique perspective on the challenges and opportunities facing young people, particularly those from underrepresented communities. Next we have, you can give her a round of applause, that's fine. Next we have Dianne Morales, the founder and president of Still Rising, an organization that helps leaders and communities reach their full potential. They are committed to working closely with clients to understand their unique needs and develop strategies that are tailored to their specific goals. She has decades of experience as an executive leader of a large-scale nonprofit human service organization. Fun fact, in 2021, she ran an unprecedented grassroots campaign for NYC mayor and was the first Afro-Latina candidate to make it to the ballot. She was also the founder of the first collective impact initiative in New York State, South Bronx Rising Together, creating a cradle to college and career program for public school students in the poorest congressional district in the country. Concurrently, she developed a career network of healthcare in partnership with Hostos Community College and Montefiore Medical Center to connect young people who were unemployed with access to careers in education and allied health professions.
Thank
you. Last but not least, we have Rasheed Ford, who has been serving as the Area Director for Housing Operations at Project Hospitality for the last 2 years. This newly formed position is responsible for overseeing all property management aspects of the agency's 400+ units of supportive housing and transitional housing. Before that, he spent 4 years as the Area Director for Housing and Support Services, which was responsible for all housing services for people living with HIV and AIDS. He has over 10 years experience in housing services, having overseen congregate, scatter site, housing placement, and emergency housing voucher, Section 8 programs. He has a bachelor's in social science with an education concentration and a master's in organizational management with a focus in public administration. He is a native Staten Islander, unfortunately, and this is where most of the community services take place today. So welcome, Rasheed. I kid. So today we're going to be talking about the importance of BIPOC mentorship and what that means for the professional growth of the people who work at the agencies we serve in. I'm going to be asking questions to the panel. At one point, you guys will be able to ask questions. I want this to be free-flowing, so bear with us as we dodge and weave through the vibes here. But the first question is, I think everyone can agree mentorship is valuable in any field that you go into. But what is the added value of having a mentor that has the same race, gender, or background that you have?
I'm happy to start. Good evening. Well, good morning, everyone. So I think what the added value is that there's a different sense of relatability and certain nuances and difficulties that we all can experience, microaggressions, feeling comfortable in a room, and sometimes where we're the only ones that look like us. So I think that when you have a mentor and you're mentoring someone who is BIPOC, is being able to have those shared experiences, certain types of ways that you're able to navigate those difficult conversations, sometimes when you need to combat maybe your leadership team or asking for what you need. and having someone that's able to almost role play with you those conversations, or sometimes when you think your response is professional and it may come off because you have a lot of emotion behind that, that they're able to help you navigate those difficult situations in a more professional manner, where you can also get your point across, get your needs met, but not put your professional stake at risk as well.
Awesome, thank you.
I mean, I think there's something to be said for the validation of feeling seen. I think a lot of the times our experiences, I mean, I've had people tell me, literally a board chair tell me, maybe your people appreciate your tone, but my people don't, right? Mm-hmm. So, the recognition and the validation and the affirmation of our experiences is really important. Over 49% of BIPOC staff leaders report that they have had negative experiences that are racialized, right? So having that acknowledged and affirmed by someone who's been there, right, in addition to someone who can help you navigate those situations, whether it's learning how to navigate it so that you change your tone, or learning how to navigate it so that you can call it out, right? Because I think we're moving towards the time where making ourselves small to help others feel comfortable is going to be in the rearview mirror, right, for us anyway. And so I think it's really important to have that kind of mentorship and relationship of someone who has the lived experience that we are experiencing as well.
Thank you.
Interestingly enough, it's also equally important when someone, even if they don't look like you, they know what you look like and they understand what you look like. And just to take a different spin, I've had the same supervisor for the last 9 years. And I've had friends and colleagues that have heard me talk about her. They've heard me say her name. And I remember we were at a staff event in December, and I pointed out my supervisor, and they said, well, I thought Gail was black. And I said, well, why did you think that? I said, I've never actually said what she was. Always just said her name. And it was in that moment that I expressed to that person, although she's not the same color I am, she understands what my color is and what that means to me. So in this mentoring, in this BIPOC, I also find it important as people of color that it may be someone else, and that's okay if that person understands what you look like and can align with what you look like and can still bring out the things that you need for your next step.
Thank you. So on that note, have any of you had a mentor not know that they were a mentor in your career?
Sure, I don't tell anybody that they're my mentor. We're just here. Sometimes the reason why I say that is it reminds me of the observation effect. Sometimes when people know, or sometimes when people think they're being watched, behaviors can change. And you might get a stage, you might get a highlight reel of a person. So for me, it has been beneficial, not necessarily to disclose to that person that there were things that I'm looking at and there are things that I was picking up because I wanted them to just be who they were going to be. And similar to the keynote speaker talking about magic, sometimes the magic starts to minimize because now I don't think I'm that magical, and I didn't think I was magical, and now you think I'm magical, right? So for me, there have definitely been a number of mentors who I actually didn't say that to until after the fact.
When I think about that question, I have to go really far back in my career. I was in graduate school, and there was an older Jamaican woman who kind of took me under her wing and really, really supported me through some hard times. I don't think I realized it at the time, but we have stayed friends, and she knows it now. And I guess the only other thing I'll add to that is it's important for everyone in this room to recognize that whether you know it or not, you're probably someone else's mentor. Just by virtue of doing the work and being in the field and working with other people of color, I'm sure that people are learning from you as well. So that's a really powerful thing to carry it's also a responsibility. But we do it all. You know, we're always doing it in the course of doing our work.
And to add to that, when everyone's always like looking and watching you, I actually have an experience where one of my mentees ended up becoming my mentor in a particular case. I actually, in the beginning of my career, was not open to public speaking, accepting being on a panel, feeling like, okay, although people are looking to me in my role as a leader, I just didn't feel comfortable speaking to a room of other leaders and those that are actually in the room doing the work. And I remember having a conversation, just a touch base with my mentee and asking, you know, how are things going? And they asked me the same thing, how are you doing? We haven't touched base. And talking to, and I was like, oh, you know, I'm gonna be on a panel. I'm a little nervous, and it was almost like they went into mentor mode with me and repeated some of the things that they heard from a previous lecture. And this is years back when I was on the academic counseling side, they were my student. And then moving forward, they're in their professional career, we're actually working at the same institution, so we're colleagues at that point, and them feeling like, well, you remember when you told us that, you know, lean into that fear, and sometimes that's good, and making sure that sometimes those opportunities that you're afraid of are the ones you should be pursuing, and sharing your story, and making sure that you are vocal no matter how afraid you are, because you don't know who in that room, regardless of what level they are in their career, actually needs to hear what you have to say, whether it's something that they know already and they just need that validation, like, yeah, I was right. Or they need to hear, and it's the first time that they're hearing that type of feedback. So it was one of those really humbling experiences where it's like, okay, you were listening, and that's great, I'm glad. And then seeing how they were able to take that to not only empower me, but they are actually a wonderful public speaker. They take the time to move forward and empower other students as they've gone, and other professionals through their career. And it's great to just have that type of flip and reverse to validate some of the work that you've been doing.
So, believe it or not, I'm only 21 years old. So, so when we think about mentors, right? Mentors we think older, like far along in their career. But what about peer mentors? Mentors, like as you was alluding to, people who may not be above or below you, maybe below you, but are giving you kind of pointers across the board. Do you have stories of that? And what is the benefit of having somebody like that in your life?
So, I'm going to jump in on that. I'm a little bit of a sort of management nerd, right? I immerse myself a lot in the literature and the research on this. And I think it's an important thing to note. So the Building Movement Project has done a series of reports over the last, 5 or 6 years called Race to Lead. And one of the things, and in that report, they have interviewed countless leaders of color, executives of color, people of color in the field. And one of the things that the findings of that actually is that people of color have less peer mentoring and supports available internally than their white counterparts, right? So I think it's important to name that, right? But we do have that, and I think it's important to know that because we have to work harder to create those systems of supports and structure for ourselves. One of the other things that has come out of those reports is that what we do have, and again, this goes to the point of working harder, we have greater supports outside, right? Mentors, coaches, et cetera. But because we're intentional about that and having to recognize that and having to seek that out, those relationships and that support. So I think it's, again, the institutions, the structures and systems are not set up to support us. Right, so we have created all sorts of systems and structures to support each other and ourselves as we try to do the work. The last sort of like footnote out, part of the work that I'm doing right now is intentionally to try to create those supports and structures for BIPOC folks who are doing this work, who need the support, who need the mentorship, who need the coaching outside of the organization because they're not getting it there. So I'm happy to talk about that offline, but.
Awesome, thank you.
When I think of peers and mentors, one thing that comes to mind, and I'm a firm believer, is that the next best idea can come from anyone and anybody. So age, position, title, stature, all of those things, definitely I don't use that as the filter to determine who can be my mentor, who I can learn from. There have definitely been people, colleagues, there have definitely been supervisees at times who have said things to me, and I'm like, oh, she's right. He's right. And there have been times where in my professional journey where it might have been a supervisee who had more experience in something, and not because they were older, but because they were doing it 10 years over there. We happen to be the same age, and I'm new over here. So when I think about peer mentorship and when I think about who can be your mentor, you definitely want to be open, you want to be receptive, because again, the next best idea, the next best piece of advice that you might need for the next step can come from anywhere.
Awesome. So Tania, can you share a personal story about a mentor who had a significant impact in your life and career?
Yeah, so early on in my career, when I was still kind of, I guess you could say, on the supportive staff side, I had the privilege of working with a supervisor who, on my first week into a department, kind of pulled me aside before this large department meeting and said, and this is one of those mentors that didn't know that she was quite a mentor until I looked back, as she was my supervisor. She pulled me aside and she says, when we go into this room, she gave me kind of a lay of the land, you're going to see a lot of the other support staff, maybe some mid-level management that are going to be sitting off to the side, and then there's going to be a big conference table. And you're going to see some of the VPs sitting there. I'll be sitting there, and you just walk in and you sit at that table. Even if there's not a seat next to me, just sit at that table. And it was one of those situations where I wasn't really sure why she said that particular at the time. It was a predominantly white institution. There was only one other person of color in the room, same level as me on the staff side, who when I entered was sitting over there off with the rest of the assistants. But what I didn't realize at that point, and then it became apparent as I moved working with her, is that each time when we would have these meetings, as she was setting me up to that, I was an extension of her. The same respect that she received from the department, she made sure that I also received that respect. When anytime there was an issue of maybe the work that I was doing or the quality of work she always had my back. And I felt empowered by her to be able to be comfortable in a space when I did have to take on the role of doing the report outs to the department when she wasn't present on her behalf, and feeling, well, I have to go in there with, her name is Joan, with that same energy and be able to speak for her, but also understand that I may be challenged and be okay, and know that if someone has an issue with it, she will have my back. Instances where there was a change in leadership in that role, and I then had to answer to her as well as another leader who we didn't quite mesh as well for various reasons, but it was great to have somebody there, the same thing. Even when there were conflict between me and another person on the C-suite, I had someone else who had the respect of the department, who was able to navigate those difficult conversations with me because she knew where my heart was, she knew my quality of work, she had no problem defending me in front of anyone, and also navigating how I could better repair that relationship with my other supervisor. And the beauty of that also, and I'll leave here, is that when the opportunity came where she saw an opportunity for me to be promoted, instead of, she reminded me that you're gonna be good at your job, and there are gonna be people that wanna keep you in that same position that you are because you're good there. Mm-hmm. And she allowed me to have that opportunity to talk about it. And she says, if you want to stay because you feel that this is where you want to be, then that's fine. But I think that it's time for you to leave. And set that up for me for that interview, and was there regardless of which pathway I went, and still maintains that relationship with me. So I have to say
awesome.
she helped me with that journey.
So do you think that, in all agencies, right, as you get higher and higher, the roles get less and less, right, because you're going up. Do you think that that can happen in earnest, where people can support you in your development, knowing that you're getting closer and closer to their role, to knocking them off or making it harder for them to move up?
No, yeah, and I think that's fair. Like, we all have feelings like, hey, who's going to come up and be the
Right.
next person? But I don't think we should fear that. I think that I'm grateful for everybody that has had a hand in getting me to where I am now. And I think that speaking to them and everyone that I believe is truly honest about doing the work and empowering the next generation, opening opportunities, there's this, and I get it, there's this scarcity mindset. The table's only big enough for X of us. There's only X amount of chairs. There's only X amount of opportunities. But the reality is, if we kind of just put that competition a little bit to the side, it's not wrong with competition. Hey, we all love that. But there's enough space for all of us. And if we're really here about, like, hey, we need to support one another, is really acting on that. Because, okay, you have a program, but you only have 20 spots. And, okay, well, this program there's more than 20 people that need. So let's all work together and try to meet those gaps. And I think that's the same thing as you move through your career. It's this idea of, well, how about if someone above me is going to take that position? It's like, no, train that person, share that knowledge, set up for the next person that is behind you that is going to take your place, so that when you leave, that's part of your legacy, if that's what if that's part of what moves you. And make sure that the work that you've started and all that work that we all know, we put a lot of work into getting things to a certain place, that it continues and it doesn't die with you. And so as you climb, lift as you climb. So,
Yeah, and I heard a little bit of gas for my question. I really want this space to be one where people could be raw as much as they can be, because as much as we want to act like we're kumbayaing and everything's great, the reality is that it's a dog-eat-dog world out there, right? And it's more than just race, right? It's even a competition amongst ourselves. And so I want to make sure that we get the most we can out of this conversation. And so please ask the questions you need to when that time comes up, that you feel like you can leave out of here with some kind of inspiration or guidance.
Can I push back on that a little bit?
Yep, please.
So I don't mean to be controversial, but I'm going to say to the point of being raw. White people do this for each other all the time, right? They open doors for each other. They mentor each other. They set up their bench. I think for us, it's a question of lifting as we climb, right?
Yeah.
There is enough work to be done to elevate our communities and to get us to where we need to be, and equity, justice, et cetera, that we can and should be doing this for each other, right?
Absolutely.
And so, yes, is it, do we live in a capitalist society that, wants us to think that there's not enough for everyone, that if, you get it, then I don't get it? Absolutely, but that is not the ethos from whence we come, right? From whence our communities come. We need to sort of continue to embrace and reinforce the notion of lifting each other up as we climb. And I think, I'm a firm believer in that, in those practices. I also believe that the best sort of sign of a good leader is how many people, they are able to elevate and put into in similar types of roles, or what happens when you leave the organization. Does the work continue? Sustainability, that's really, to me, a powerful sign of strong leadership, right? And for me personally, my legacy, my greatest legacy, is the number of people who at some point or another reported to me, who are now executive directors, who would tell you that they feel like I was a critical part of their ascension into that role.
Absolutely. Well said. Amen. So Rasheed. For folks in the audience who are looking to be mentors, what advice do you give them in terms of how do you create that relationship? How do you start that awkward first convo? How do you make yourself accessible as a mentor?
There are three things that come to my mind. Number one, being approachable. There are so many people that I've never spoken to again because that first time I asked them a question, the response was either snide, standoffish. It was couched in so many negative emotions that left me saying, whatever you even have to offer, I don't want it. So you can't be a mentor. Talent can take you places and open doors, and then character will close it, right? So the first part of being a mentor is that first impression, being approachable, right? People have told me I seem standoffish, and then when they ask me something and they see I'm not, that's more important to me. If you didn't approach, it's okay. Everybody's, not everybody's for everybody. But definitely, number one is being approachable. That first impression matters. Number two, you can't pick your mentee. What do I mean? Sometimes people get in positions where people believe that they've arrived at a certain place that they want to assign themselves to someone. And the mentee has to choose the mentor, right? You want to come into the room and folks got to know that you're the smartest. Folks have to know that you're the mentor. Folks got to know that you're the CEO. And when you disalign yourself that way, again, how? If you're not even relatable in that way, if we can't walk shoulder to shoulder, if it always seems like you want to sit over there, right? And I'm going to sit at this table, and I'm going to get coffee with that other CEO, and it's always that kind of mentality. People see that too, right? People see when you always want to do this, and you always want to puff up. So I think the second part is the humility that should remain, and not being so prideful and not feeling the need to establish yourself and try to always do this, right? And lastly is being teachable. When people, I've seen where people get to a certain stature and just truly believe that they've arrived. Don't go to no more trainings. Don't listen to nobody. No more conferences, right? There's this ideology that they had established 15 years ago, and that becomes dead, right? So I would definitely say to someone who wants to be a mentor, when you believe that you've arrived, you haven't. When you believe that you've arrived, you haven't. There's more to learn, and it can come from anywhere. So number one, be approachable, right? They say how you show up, right? Be nice. Number two, don't be overly prideful. Don't try to, nobody wants this constant unsolicited advice. You could be right, nobody asked you though. Nobody asked you. You got an answer for everything that goes out in the air. Nobody asked you. And then I don't want to ask you because you always got something to say. You always have something to say. And thirdly, continue to learn, continue to be teachable, remember that none of us are ever above reproach. You're wrong sometimes. You're wrong, and that's okay. So that's what I would say to anyone who wants to be an effective mentor.
Awesome. Well, some of you already have touched on this, but despite comparable training, tenure, and experience, people of color tend to be underrepresented in leadership. How can a mentor kind of offset that disparity?
Well, thinking about the question that you posed to Tania, how could a mentor offset tying those two? I remember I got some email. Y'all know how people are tough in emails, man. People get real gangster in emails. Everybody's so in emails. And I'm reading this email, and my first thought is, who are you talking to? And my response was very nasty. So my supervisor called me, and she says, I know what you meant to say, Rasheed, and I know why you might have been offended, but do you think that your response was the most appropriate? Do you think that that's going to advance this conversation? And I said, first I had to say I don't care, but No, right? Hastening to the conclusion, it made me again acknowledge that the way I grew up being a person of color, there was a level of hostility, aggression, there was a level of savagery, and then we create natural coping mechanisms where we're tougher, stronger, quicker to think, get right back at you. And then you get placed in a different environment, and it takes someone to point out that that is now would be considered maladaptive because you don't need that way. And so my mentor definitely, if she had the opportunity to speak to more people, you get more bees with honey, and words matter. So I definitely choose my words carefully, and I think as people of color, whatever that might be, a lot of us have some of those same traits where we can be very, 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 and we don't know when to either tone it down or turn it off, and then people would be a bit more willing to engage. And I think there are some people that I worked with that I believed would have had a seat at the next table if they were willing to code switch and chill out. That's what I would say. If a mentor could do anything for you to bring more people to the table, I think it's knowing that it's okay to know what environment that we're in and what game we need to play.
Awesome. So Dianne, as you embarked on these ventures to create and lead these organizations and initiatives that you have, did you seek support within the community for that? Did you have to create new connections to help you get through those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer when we're creating something that we need to engage the people that we're creating it to serve, right? I mean, that's significant. The way I think about sort of my journey, what comes to mind is like I've Frankensteined supports together, right? Like I can't think of one mentor who has sort of been my key person for everything, right? It's sort of like, you know, the older Jamaican woman I talked about earlier really spoke to me about, you know, experiences as a woman of color navigating spaces, right? Then there's somebody else who really helped me with the financial management stuff, right? Then there's someone else who helped me with the board development stuff. So, you know, I've kind of created and pieced together what I would call kind of my council, right? My kitchen cabinet, my sort of personal board for doing this work. And in terms of the work that I'm doing now and the projects and the initiatives that I'm leading now, they're all based both on my personal experiences and the experiences of my peers, right? Other leaders of color, other folks of color who've been doing this work, and the acknowledgement and understanding of what's been missing for us, right? The things that we wish that we had had along the way to help us navigate situations, to help us, you know, open doors, to help us move up the ladder, right? The thing that is called social capital, right? Which happens and is in existence much more naturally for our white peers than it is for us. So what does it look like to be intentional about creating these systems, supports, and structures for our community, right? What does it look like to build community among peers? What does it look like to build social capital, to connect us to folks who look like us, who might have different positions, who can help open doors, who can help make an introduction, who can help expedite, you know, that invoice that is outstanding, right? So those kinds of things, it's always been really important to me to rely on and create those systems for myself, if only sometimes just to, you know, recognize that you're not crazy, that like the experiences that you think you're having are real. And having that kind of community and network has been a game changer.
Awesome. This also goes to you, Dianne, but to all three of you. What are some like really effective ways that a nonprofit, and because a nonprofit there's not a lot of money, so preferably cheap or free. What are some ways that organizations can invest in their staff by incorporating mentorship type qualities in the work that they do?
Yeah. That's a really timely question. So I have an editorial coming out in Philanthropy New York next week where I'm actually addressing that question. I think the paradigm of how the sector operates needs to shift. There's enough data, there's enough reports, there's enough research that shows that people of color in these roles are getting the short shift, right? And so what do we need to do differently? And the call to action in that specific piece is for boards and philanthropy to put their money where their mouth is, right? Because they're all sort of tinkering around the edges of ways to support, but they really need to lean in and get out of the way. That's part of what I'm saying to them, right? Like, lean in, put the resources on the table. Don't tell us how to use them. Don't tell us how you want us to measure it. Let us be the ones who decide what we need, how we do it, and what we want out of it, right? So, I know that sometimes that might feel kind of like a pipe dream, but we're in a critical moment, I believe, right now, post-pandemic, with all of this information coming out, where we can, I think, harness the power of the sector and push for critical change so that we can actually advance in the ways that we need to.
Awesome. You can scan the QR code to donate $5 to Dianne for governor. I'll be a campaign manager. I got you. Either one of you want to add to that? Dianne, you spoke too soon. You spoke too soon.
Reach.
In agreement. How did you guys find the mentors in your life? How did you come across those individuals?
I'll jump in on that. Combination of both natural connections and people you meet that somehow, without them knowing, become your mentor. And to where she was saying is that you can't pick your mentee, and I strongly believe that, because there were a few people who, I guess, wanted me to be a mentee, and then realizing I had connections with other people within our department, within, just going to networking events and meeting people that you just find synergy with, and you're able to continue that conversation. I think follow-up is one of the biggest things when you come to these types of events, other type of networking opportunities, and when you have that connection with someone, is always making sure, and you get that card, is you actually follow up with that person, because there's no lack. People want to talk. People want to share their knowledge. People want to, especially those that have been able to overcome a hurdle, people want to be part of everyone else's success. So I think it's leaning into that. And then as I've gone through my career, I've had to be more intentional on trying to find the type of mentor that I want. So as a first-time ED of a non-for-profit, is reaching out to other EDs and non-for-profits, because it's like, I think I know, but then when you really get down to it, all of the other hats that you have to wear, and all of the resources that you don't know until you're in a situation and you're like, okay, you're scrambling, and then it's having that toolbox, that network, and that goes for all parts of your life, whether, personal, you have your friends as serve as your advisors, and it's the same thing professionally. So I think it's been a mix of both those kind of formal mindsets, entering into fellowship programs. Even currently, I entered newly into a fellowship program, and always being open to learning, but also the natural connections that happen, and just making sure that you always, lean into that collaborative power and share resources. So, it's been both.
I would say, first of all, it's hot in here. I don't know why the air is off. Shouldn't have wore this turtleneck. I know for me, personally, surprisingly, I am an introvert, and I don't like mingling. I don't like the cocktail hour. I don't do well. I tend to stay in a spot and just pick that spot and just watch. And that is a hindrance. That is a hindrance. So when it comes to finding a new mentor, insanity, right, is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And it took me a while. I've been in this agency now for 12 years, and it took about 6 or 7 of them before I realized if I want more, I'm going to have to do more, and I'm going to have to be in different spaces, or you'll end up being this quote-unquote big fish in what can be a very small tank. So when I think about trying to find a new mentor and getting new experiences, it really is about diversifying. So now I find myself even connecting with Resh through Shinny, getting on different mailing lists that I never had been on before, and just like, oh my God, all of this is going on out there in the world. All of this is going on out there. I would definitely recommend, if you're only going to work and going home and things like that, and you're not a part of this work group, you're not a part of on that list serve, then it's very likely that there's a narrow perspective that you may have. And getting on these different work bodies and work groups has certainly changed my perspective, and has certainly opened doors that I didn't know were present. Not that they weren't open, I didn't know they were there.
I guess the only thing I would add to that is think about small steps, right? You don't have to walk up to somebody and be like, will you be my mentor? That's never happened to me. I'd never do that. But, can I have coffee with you? Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can I call you, right? Can we do a quick Zoom, right? Those are good ways to begin to establish a connection. You get to sort of explore, is this someone that I want to sort of continue? And you kind of can drive that. I don't know that I've ever said no to anyone who really asked me that, right? In a genuine way. And I've had, mentees claim me and say, you're my mentor, right? But that came out of sort of, we met for coffee, we had so think about, if it's intimidating to you, think about starting small. If there's someone who is compelling, if there's someone who you want to connect with or learn more from, just start small and build from there. Because I think you'd be surprised at the connections and the response that you might get.
So I'm about to turn it over to you guys to ask questions, but before we do that, I just want to say that to kind of echo what these two were just saying. For me, taking part in these type of opportunities allows you to be exposed more. I got to reconnect with somebody who I knew from my past. Rasheed, I admired from afar, so now I understand why he was in the corner the whole time, so now I could talk to him. And Dianne, after researching your bio, I was like, oh my God, I got to get to know this woman because I got to be her campaign manager. So again, being exposed allows you to have these opportunities that you wouldn't have if you just decided to stay in the corner or watch the conference virtually or just do the in-house trainings at your job. Really think about ways that you can expand your opportunities in your horizon. So with that said, the mic is open for anybody who wants to come up and ask questions to our panel. Don't be scared.
Hi. I'm Aisha. I actually participated in the Relish second cohort, so a lot of what you have all been talking about is really resonating. And so I consider myself an emerging leader. What would you, and you've talked about this a bit, what are some qualities of a good mentor?
Of a good mentor?
Yes.
Why are you looking at me like that? You see that?
A mentor.
We're looking at you for guidance.
I mean, I think a good mentor can both support you and call you out when need be, right? And that combination and that balance put you in check, right? And also, but do it in a way that feels supportive and nurturing, not like it's cutting you down. And a certain amount of accessibility, I think, is the other thing I would say. And that doesn't mean you can call me anytime or you can show up anytime, but if you let me know you need something, we're going to figure it out at a time that works for both of us, right? So I think those are the two sort of top things that I think about when I think about a mentor.
I like that you said accessibility. That is such a big one. And the higher you go up, you got a meeting now, a meeting later, a meeting again. You're being double booked. But accessibility remains so important. So, people know, don't call me. Just send me a text. send me an email. I got you. I'm going to respond right now. You call me. I'm going to look at it for a moment, and I might ask. I'm waiting to listen to the voicemail so I can see what you wanted. But one of the things, in all seriousness, that I do take seriously and pride myself on is being responsive. If you text me, I'm going to text back. If you call, I'm going to call you back. If you email me, I'm going to email you back. You know, you see those relationships deteriorate where it takes 5, 6, 7 days. They haven't gotten back to you. It's like, did you not see it? Like, what is that about? And it just is caustic to the relationship. Why would I keep emailing? You never respond, right? Or it takes you a week. I think accessibility is important because, again, you're going up on the ladder now. You're only responding to other people that are in that C-suite rather than the randoms that had a question that from some other agency, and you're looking at the title and you're like, oh, could you respond to such and such and so and so? So I think a good mentor remains accessible.
Yeah, and I have to say that going off of that is just being consistent. And you know, one tactic may work for one mentor. You may have one that wants to have structured meeting times, and that may work for you and your mentee, and then it may not work for another one, and things need to be a little bit more informal. So also having that flexibility when you're choosing to be a mentor, and being realistic with yourself in that particular time frame. You have work commitments, family commitments, making sure that you know you're also able to show up when it matters. And because that's also being present. I think is just sometimes being there goes a long way. And even if there's a particular issue that you may not be the best suited mentor for that mentee, but just being there and providing that reassurance to them goes a very long way.
Awesome, thank you. And also, please say your name so we can know where agency you're from, and we can address you by your name.
Okay. Hi, my name's Abby Nyamacha. I'm a Chief Administrative Officer at the Center for Urban Community Services.
Welcome.
I'm also part of Relish and Resh. I'm a mentor along with Rasheed, and it's been a fantastic experience for myself personally as a mentor, and also for our staff who've been mentees as well, and I think for the broader supportive housing community. And so the question I have is really about how organizations, because part of the beauty of the Relish program is harnessing a larger community of mentors and even teachers through the Hunter program. But how can an organization have its own mentorship program? Do you have some recommendations, or can you maybe some examples of successful businesses or nonprofits that have founded in mentorship programs?
Well, excuse me, I'm sorry. The thing that comes to mind, I heard my pastor say, it's okay to be a copycat if you copy the right cat. If you copy the right cat, emulation, right? And we see the work has already begun, right? And they say there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So even looking at the Relish program, even looking at the Resh program, even looking at, some of them are escaping me, some of the other names. Moving on.
American Express has one as well.
Right,
yeah.
And that was right there, and I was like, why am I thinking of a credit card? And looking at someone who's doing it, looking at someone who's already doing it, and implementing it on a smaller scale, and like Dianne said, we had to put some money up, right, potentially. But a lot of our organizations have great social capital and resources there where you could make something available. And one of the things, especially as your agency gets bigger, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. You don't meet people in other departments. So then there are resources that get siloed. There's social capital that doesn't get distributed. There are people in great positions in the agency who never get to interact with other people that could use the information and the personality. So I think it would be helpful if we looked at something that is already happening, take that, repeat it on a smaller scale, and trust us first that are in the agency that you can do it. You don't always need to outsource. It's a great thing that some of these programs do exist, because then we can move beyond the agency. But I feel like every time somebody's like, maybe we can get somebody from the outside, but what about you? You're great, you're smart, that's why you're in the position that you're in, so why wouldn't you do it, right? So that's one thing that comes to my mind.
So I'm thinking about this, admittedly, from the perch of a CEO seat, right? Because that's been the roles that I've had for the last whatever. I think there's a leadership responsibility here in terms of the culture of an organization, and how an organization elevates and supports its staff. I know that for me, from a practice perspective, we never created programs that were called mentorship programs, right? But there was a culture, and I, as a leader, modeled it, right, by supporting my staff and I had an open door policy, which sometimes irked my senior staff, right? Why is my person coming to you directly? But it was about creating those opportunities for connection and for mentorship, and also the expectation, right, that other folks were doing that for staff across the organization. So I guess I would say, if that's something that's important to you, I wouldn't be afraid to raise it, right, with leadership and say, can we think about this? Can we have this conversation? What would it take for us to do this? Again, and to think about ways to start small scale. I think what Rasheed is talking about, there are programs that operate that have established best practices, right? How do we take those best practices and bring them in-house so that we can also do the best of our ability internally, right? There are things, I don't think it's impossible. Would an infusion of finances be helpful? Absolutely. But what can we do with the resources that we have, right? Because we know that the sky isn't going to open up and drop a lot of money on us for this work. But this is important. And so how can we talk to leadership and get leadership bought into this idea and begin to create some of that internally in the systems and, structures that we have?
And to that point, I think that small nonprofits tend to do this naturally, where they want to, they're looking for a CPO, or they're looking for a COO, and so they're going to train that person that's been working with them to be in those positions. And as the organization grows, I think they lose a little bit of that, because then because it become much more noticeable. Then they want the COO from, say, Verizon. They try to outsource, and sometimes we forget that we have the talent in house. And so if we can mentor and build within, you'll have a happier staff pool. You'll have a feeling of, I may not get what I want in my paycheck as a director or whatever, but guess what? I've been promoted, and I've been seen. I'm getting the skills that I want, right? Because it's not always about the money. It's about the skill set. It's about the titles. It's about what you can put on your resume. So think about that as well for an agency, if anybody out there who has the power to make these decisions, to really think about how do you support the people you have beyond just increasing pay, because we said it's the money isn't there, right? We wish it was, and there's people advocating for us, thankfully, but it's a give and take, right? One year we get what we need, and next year it goes away. So think about that. Next question.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sade Fasanya. I'm a senior director at Project Renewal. Related to code switching, because this question has come up a lot with people that I've supervised and people that are, I guess, looking for mentorship as well, and I don't always know how to answer this question. So we talk about use of self a lot in this work that we're doing. How are you all finding the balance of showing up as your authentic self but code switching? Like, how are you finding that where you're doing it but not suppressing who you are?
I would say the first thing that comes to my mind, I happen to be a religious person, and it's in the Bible, and I think in Romans, but where Paul says, I become all things to certain people, depending on who I'm speaking to, depending on what the audience is. And I don't think I lose myself if I know that in order to advance or to get the best product out of this relationship, that there are some people, I like to joke, there are some people who are more sensitive, right? That means what? I can't snap on you. There are other people that love it. So guess what? That's what we're doing all day. And I think it's understanding that what you're doing, I believe Dianne said it earlier, or it might have been Tania, excuse me, navigating emotional territory is a big part of what we do. And you can't just badger in and be your authentic self in every space if it's gonna cause damage, right? Why just is that's just selfish, right? So I'm not minimized, and I don't think I'm less than when I realize the space that I'm in and I say, okay, all right, I see what we need to do here. I see how I should talk here versus how I should talk there. And I think it's putting it in the perspective that you're actually being wise and you're actually being smart and you're reading the room and you're navigating this emotional territory correctly.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think that, back to your earlier comment about that we create coping mechanisms to get through the work that we do in the environment that we live in, that can play a big role in trying to bring who you are. But sometimes it's not really who you are. It's just how you've survived, right? So I'm big on analogies. And so I think about, if your favorite color is blue, you can wear blue, right? But it might mean that you can't wear like blue biker shorts to work, right? It means you have to wear blue jeans or blue slacks. Bring that blue that you like so much, but like convert it in a way that's appropriate for the work and environment that you in. And I've learned the hard way. I have my supervisor in the audience. But you have to, you don't lose yourself by changing those aspects that will make you more palatable to the people around you. It is a skill, and that's one that I would say that I'm getting, I'm getting coaching on that alone, because I realize that's an area of my growth, right? And so definitely think about how you can get your mentors and your companies to help invest in you so you can learn those skills.
Hi, I'm Fallon Theodore. I'm a building director with Breaking Ground. And my question is, when in nonprofit, there is a limited amount of us in the C-suites, executive positions, and you're looking for that additional support so that you can kind of be in that space, but it's being stifled. You're getting the, I don't have time, I'm unavailable, I'm what have you. And you're getting it maybe from the counterparts, you're getting it from your whites, et cetera. What do you do in those moments? Because we're talking about people of color in mentorship in nonprofit, and that is very, very small. So there's like 2 people in the C-suite, and they're overwhelmed. They're not trying to talk to 5 of us, trying to come up. So what advice could you give to the 2 that is up there that can look below and look, across to say, hey, I want to give this support, but there's only 2 of us, and I don't have the time. What suggestions do you have for that?
I mean, I think this is part of why I commented earlier to say that folks of color in the sector tend to actually have to go outside their organizations, right? Again, systemic structural issues, I think, but also to your point, which sounds more like a resource constraint issue, right? When it's a small organization, everybody's doing more than their full-time job. I would just encourage you to look for actively, right? This is the intentionality and the deliberate, excuse me, work that we have to do to actively seek out that kind of support outside of your organization. If you can't get it internally, do not sacrifice yourself. Find a way to create that outside.
Yeah, and to Diane's point, and that's, I think, really what we're seeing is that you have to look, unfortunately, although, Dianne is also working on creating spaces for leaders of color, but it's being very intentional, going out there, putting yourself out there, even though sometimes it is a little uncomfortable, and taking that leap, because it is about yourself, your development as well, and along the way, maybe creating that space, even though it shouldn't always rely on you or us to create spaces for us, but unfortunately that's sometimes what we have to do until we get to a better place. But it really is being more intentional. And even though we're talking about non-for-profits, there are people that are in small businesses and in the corporate C-suite that can also provide you some guidance. Maybe they did come from a non-for-profit background, or there's just certain tools that, even though it's not nonprofit focused, that are still applicable to the industry or being in a professional setting. So sometimes you have to be a little bit creative on who you reach out for and what exactly it is you're looking to get from that type of relationship.
I'd also like to add, because I believe the tail end of the question is, what advice or what would you say to those 2, right?
if they were up there.
I didn't even see what you.
No, specific to, right?
Yeah.
What would you?
To what suggestions would you give them to
Yeah.
look across?
They should have been here.
Because maybe, again, I know you said you find your mentor, but maybe they can also find us if they're making themselves available. What would that look like for them?
I thought about, excuse me, the term knowledge management comes to my mind. And if everything's only living with one or two people, there's no sustainability in that. I think about years ago, I think like 7, 8 years ago, one person was out. Nobody knew who ordered the furniture. Nobody had the key. No, I'm like, Kim does everything. Nobody knows but Kim. The world stopped that day because I love her. Still work with Kim. Kim wasn't in. Nobody knew where the keys were, when the furniture was coming. And that is chaotic, right? So it goes back to also what Dianne said about culture. It's about knowledge management, right? I don't want to be called on my day off. But if I'm the only one who knows it, guess what's going to happen? So I got to make sure you know enough so that I can be left alone, right? So it would be beneficial, right, if they even thought from that perspective. We got to share, we got to disseminate this information and this knowledge so that it's moving through, right? And there are at least 4 more people that can do some mentorship, that does have the information, so that even though they may not have the accessibility that they want, if they want it, I'm not saying it, but that's what comes to my mind. Now, knowledge management, if we think about business, that would be a good conversation to have.
Yeah, to add to that as well, as a manager, you can't, for my staff, you can't tell me you don't know something or that you're scared to do something. So that's the one thing I'm going to make you do. So again, it's about spreading that knowledge, but also aside from the people up there going down, is for you as well. I have a mentor that I went to myself, Mark Jennings, the CEO of Project Fine. Went up to him and was like, hey, I want you to be my mentor. He's like, all right. I was like, great, thanks. And I got what I needed for that relationship because he's amazing and he does a lot. And we share a lot of the same passions. So it just felt like a good fit. And also peer supervision, peer support, getting with a whole bunch of directors that you know, sitting together for lunch and saying, hey, so what are you doing? What have you learned? You went to this conference, what did you get from that, right? And sharing that information. Because I know there's only, I don't know how many agencies can afford 20,000 tickets to Shani, but I'm sure that you have colleagues that couldn't make it today, right? So are you gonna go back to your job and give them this information, right? Disseminate this information so it does not live with just yourself. All right, sir?
Hi, my name is Esmeralda Little Cruz from the Jericho project. This question is more directed towards you and your careers. To become a mentor, you all had to face challenges. So my question is, what are some of your pitfalls you faced to get to where you are today, and how did you overcome them?
So I'm going to jump into that one. I was very, I guess you could say, rough around the edges when I first started, and I learned that sometimes, in some rooms, it's who speaks the loudest, and sometimes when I speak loudly and passionately, it's not received well. And it was really hard because although I think that I'm introverted and don't like social settings, and I had this perception of how I was perceived to the world, it was very different on when someone sat down with me and said, hey, no, you actually come off as very assertive, whether you like it or not. You sound sometimes that you're very loud and committed, and it's just more so I just have a very booming voice if I don't pay mind to that. And it was really hard for sometimes to hear some of that feedback, because in my head I was like, well, I am being respectful. I am coming with what I'm just trying to get my point across, but always being in rooms where I felt like I needed to like fight to get my point across, and always feeling like I needed to come back with the data and the information to support whatever my thought was. Yeah. And being able to have those conversations with some of my peers, some people to validate, no girl, like I in this moment where you kind of went out of pocket, you were right, but here are some better ways of navigating that, and hearing that from not only my peers but those above me, sometimes those below me, was really helpful in just being more mindful and self-aware. A little self-awareness goes a long way, And going back to having to code switch, at first, I thought I was like, oh, well, now I'm not really being me. I'm losing myself and realizing, no, because I guess out-of-pocket me is still professional me. It's just how I show up, time and place, and truly understanding that and finding better ways where it's like, I'm not telling you about yourself that you need to, or not telling you that this is what I need and being assertive, but just making sure that it's done in a more eloquent manner, and I'm not putting myself or my career at risk just because of emotion, and realizing that I also not allowing grace for others when they approach me, and allowing and understanding that they also have to grant me grace, and it's always going to be a two-way street with that.
It's not always us that's wrong, or that has to adjust, or that has to whatever, right? I just have to say that. I will tell you that in a role that I had as a CEO, my biggest challenge was my board. My biggest challenge was my board saying things to me like, well, instead of doing that program, can't we work with the little ones before they mess up? Right? And that helped me understand what I was dealing with, right? It also helped me understand, previously in my career, I was a bull in a china shop, right? If someone had said that to me 5 years prior, I would have been like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right? Sorry. I hope this is not being recorded.
It is, and transcripts will be given to the senior citizen home across the street.
But instead, I responded by saying, I think we have the bandwidth to do both, right? The flip side of that, though, is after 10 years of navigating and walking that tightrope, it was killing me, right? So, this idea of us navigating these pitfalls, like, it's a needle that we have to thread, right? And yes, we have to be able to code switch, and yes, we have to be able to sort of navigate to be successful in this world. And also, we have to be very, very careful not to lose ourselves and not to cause harm to ourselves, right? These things take a toll on us, psychically, emotionally, physically. They manifest, right? So, yes, we have to do all these things, and I want to encourage that, and I want to support that, and I want to mentor for that, and also I want to acknowledge the toll that takes on us.
So Dianne, sorry, real quick, to that point, I was disillusioned when I got into this field that as long as I kept moving up, I'll have less people to answer to, and I can be the bull in the china shop, and nobody can say anything to me because I'm the director, I'm the CEO. And what I found the hard way was that the more you go up, the more restrictions there are on you. Because if you think about you were CEO, right? So everybody, you could do whatever you want. No, there's a board, right? There's always a boss for everybody, right? Yeah. Even when I go home, my daughter's my boss. I can't even do what I want to go home. Yeah. So it's about navigating these relationships in ways that you can be your authentic self while still managing those types of relationships and getting your point across. Because I love being a bull in the china shop. It's my favorite thing.
And I actually adopted a philosophy in that role of asking forgiveness rather than asking permission.
Yes.
So that I could do what I wanted to do.
Yes.
Right? Oh, you wanted to know about that? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right? But still, I guess my point is, it takes a toll, and I just want to just be clear about that. It's not like, we have this great toolkit, and as long as you do this, you'll be okay. It takes a toll.
Yeah, I used to be 95 pounds. Look at me now. Sorry, Rasheed.
I'll keep it short. I see the cue. The biggest pitfall, one of the things I had to certainly learn, managing emotions and not letting it in the ship, right? This being the ship. So I've gotten to a place where the things that get said, and I'm not talking about racially charged, I'm just talking about just period, I don't internalize it, and that's a big part of this process of moving up, is not what triggers me is up to me, right? And always taking accountability, they made me, no. I am in control of how I'm gonna respond, right? And I had to learn that so that I can continue to move forward and I don't let someone else derail me, when it's really my response derailed me and how I internalized it. So that was, to me, probably the biggest lesson to learn that makes life also a lot easier because I don't care.
I'm just gonna, the gentleman in the back with the blue shirt, he's gonna cap off my questions just because I want to make sure we end on time, so you're good. And so we have a next question from Mr. Love.
Thank you. My name's Rodney Loveday. I work for Breaking Ground, and I was a part of the first cohort of Relish, and it inspired me to start a mentoring program in our organization, which is fairly small, but my question is really about the sort of specific challenges that we faced in that mentoring program, and that is more about the inter-community issues within a BIPOC group, the problems that arise there. So if you faced any of those, or if you have any tips on how you manage that or how you handle those specific challenges that are unique to BIPOC mentorship.
Okay. Yes. Yes. The interesting thing about this, I really appreciate the question, because the interesting thing about this is I've been spending a lot of time over the last 2 years in conversation with other Black women specifically about this. And one of the things that happens is as soon as I raise it, the tone goes like this, right? Because we're not supposed to talk about that, right? The whole idea of kind of being public about inter-group challenges is a little bit taboo. And also, we need to find a way to start having these conversations and to start addressing this so that we can strengthen our communities, right? And so I am currently, one of the things I'm working on is a piece to sort of begin to address that and figuring out how we bring that into the light without further fueling, right? Because the outsiders want to say, see, there they go, right? And so it's a really fine line, right? There's a balancing act there, figuring out how we do it in a constructive way that strengthens us internally, but also can sort of bring some lessons to the larger world. But I don't have the answer yet on that one.
All right, thank you.
My name is Janet. I'm with Community Life. I'm a program director. And you talked about bringing this information back to our agencies. You talked about mentees, making sure mentors being approachable, mentees being open for coaching. What pointers or suggestions do you have for extending this conversation to the younger generations in terms of how they show up for work, being used to and complicit with instant gratification? I'm here to get my check. I want to get paid X amount of money for doing the least amount possible. How can we as leaders support the younger generations coming in to see the big picture, to encourage them to accept peer mentoring even, to learn from their peers, to want to be ambitious, to climb that ladder, to seek out that knowledge and expand their skills beyond, I'm just here to do my job, and if it's not in my job description, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Can I say something really quick about that? So Dr. Amer, who is one of the professors at Relish, he makes jokes about Gen Zs all the time, so those damn Gen Zers. And he said something where, he was my professor when I was in my master's program, and he said for the first time in his career, he received an email from a student that said, hey, Dr. Amer, I'm not coming to class today because I'm taking mental health day. And he was like, huh? And then I in the audience, you could do that? I could tell my professor I'm not coming to class because I have a mental health day? And so what I will push back a little bit, because I'm with you, because I had that was in my head, but I also want to say that there's things we can learn from them. And I think speaking as a millennial, there was things that were installed on us that we come to work and we constantly trying to do that. We're in that capitalist mindset and they're not there. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's a way we can meet in the middle where we can take some of that, I'm not gonna take this crap and go home and leave the work at work, because they can do that really easily. I can't. I'm home, I'm still thinking about the meeting I had 9 o'clock 2 days before, right? So that there might be a way that we can learn from them in that aspect, but we'll still try to meet them in the middle saying, but the work is still here, and while you're here, I need you to do this. Mm-hmm. And that goes, And that comes in supervision, that comes in training, that comes in discussions, right? To try to get them to say, hey, this is what the deliverables are, this is what our mission is, right? Maybe there's a way that in my program, we talk about the mission within the program, right? There's the mission of the agency, but what is our mission here in the program? And we revise that every year, right? And that's how you get them to have buy-in, right? And so then in supervision, you go, you said you wanted to help us, get people to be more independent and whatever, right? How did you contribute to this during this month, right? How did you get us closer to this mission, right? And start to get them to have buy-in in their own work. Because if they don't have buy-in, they're not going to do it, right? And so that's my little tidbit for that. But I'll turn it over to my colleagues if they want to add.
I would only say managing expectations, knowing that certain things generationally, like we're not the same as mom and dad, things just change, right? People change, humanity changes, it is what it is. One of the things, to counter burnout, because I have a direct report, it's like, but why didn't they do this and bring that? And I said, stop expecting you from everybody. Mm-hmm. Somebody's going to do it, but not everybody's going to do everything, right? I'm not going to be mad at you not doing what's not in your job description. You don't have to, right? But there are people who would. Right, so I think it's also about managing expectations. How do we hire the right people? And also, I would always tell them. I said, did they do the job? Is that what they were supposed to do? All right, then you got to leave them alone. They don't have to do, the rest. They don't have to even want to do more, and that's okay, because people tend not to stay long when that's how they feel about the position anyway. So it'll fix itself, hopefully.
Yeah.
To that, I have to also say, I think it's also being clear with your expectations towards them on a particular task, accountability and follow through and just reminding them of that. I know even working in academic advising on like the college students, I always used to say, it's like the more education someone has, sometimes they just don't read. And that didn't drive me crazy. It's right there. Mm-hmm. And so I think that even though we have some faults with all the other generations, ourselves included, but to your point, John, that we can learn a lot from the younger generation. I don't think that, like some people say, oh, they're lazy. If we go by how they're acting in community and such, that they are actually, they can organize. If they have a cause, if they are empowered, they do want to engage, they do want to be present, but it's also us finding that medium ground and finding ways to engage them, whether it's, making our information a little bit more concise and short, mm-hmm. making, leveraging technology, because that's where they're focused at. And we may write everything down, and I may love technology, but I'm still gonna, take pen to paper, and you can't change me from that, but that's not gonna work with some of the younger generation. And so it's kind of like figuring out where that medium ground is, being consistent, holding them accountable, and yes, and you're gonna be banging your head, but understanding like where they're coming from, and that we're not the same, and that's okay. Yeah. And just trying to figure out where you can work together, and maybe there are gonna be specific solutions that you kind of curtail to meet with that particular group of employees or mentees or students that you're working with that you may not use with some of your other staff, and just flexibility and being open to that.
Yeah. And every generation thinks the generation after them is going to screw up the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Boomers thought the hippies of the Xers were going to destroy the world. The Xers think the millennials are going to do it. The millennials think the Zers are going to do it. So, we're going to be fine. We're just going to adapt, okay?
They're actually going to save us.
Yeah.
They're going to save us. They're going to transform the way work is expected, right?
Yeah.
They're going to say, I'm no longer going to work to live. I'm going to, what is it? Live to work. I'm going to work to live, right?
We just have to make sure we support them.
I want to have a life.
Yes.
Right? So that's...
No, I agree. I was in a meeting and somebody said, can I have a volunteer? And I wanted to say, yes, I'll do it so badly. And I said, Jonathan, I have too much on my plate. My eye was twitching. Yeah. And I just turned off my camera, put myself on mute, and was like, end this meeting now before I say yes, right? I guarantee you all of my Gen Z staff members would not have raised their hands. Yep. So I took a page out of their book. So that works. Ms. Rivers.
Oh, you know my name.
Have good eyesight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Terry Rivers, and I'm from Jericho Project, so bear with me. Sorry, I get a little nervous in front of people. I just wanted to ask a question, just going back to what Mr. Ford did address as far as him being an introvert and how it could be difficult sometimes to reach out for mentorship. Sorry. For someone who's in this field who presents as a younger case manager or a younger worker, I wanted to pretty much just focus on the need for the mentorship and the mentor getting to understand their own biases when it comes to even thinking towards the upcoming generation of workers. Not to point you out, but just your statement alone right there can make someone who is coming across as a younger worker feel like, I don't want to go for mentorship because everyone is viewing me in this way. So as a mentor, how are ways that you have made yourself, outside of being accessible to your mentee, kept yourself accountable of knowing your own biases and not pretty much just projecting them onto your mentee?
Good question.
Yeah, self-awareness. I know Tania said self-awareness and honesty and humility. Just remembering that you're just not above reproach. I'm the type, I'm headstrong, so until you prove me wrong, I think I'm right. But once I see I'm wrong, oh, I'm wrong. and I'm sorry. I would say that we need to manage our expectations, not try to make carbon copies of ourselves, and to just be honest and open that you're not perfect.
Thank you. Ms. Barley, yes.
Hi, sorry. My name is Pizza Barley. I am the Assistant Program Director for Jericho Project.
I hope you know that.
I don't necessarily have a question. I just wanted to come up here and highlight someone who I felt has been an extremely amazing mentor in my professional development. I started Jericho in 2020 alongside Mr. Castro. And I was always very vocal about the fact that I wanted to move up. So I started out as a case manager and have been very vocal about my professional growth and where I saw myself. I have a 15-year plan. But one of the things that I've been, every opportunity that I was able to communicate was the fact that I wanted to move up. And so when the opportunity came for me to be able to move up, there was a little hurdle in the plan because I didn't have my master's at that time, but being that Jonathan knew my work ethics and the fact that I was very passionate about the job itself, he offered me this amazing opportunity to interim as his quote-unquote liaison. And so while I was in the role, I was in the role doing the job of an assistant director as a case manager at the time, and then also because he knows I move by paper, advocated for me to get a bonus in that position while he was able to reach out to DOHMH and have them change the policy and that master's requirement so that I would be able to apply for the position because I had I think I had everything necessary except the master's part. And so now, starting out, whoever wants to, get into that space and felt like they're not having their master's was holding them back can be able to, when I move up, apply for that position. And so I just wanted to say that I know we're in this conversations about mentorship, but there are people who not only talk the talk, but walk the walk and would advocate for you in rooms that you have not been in. And that is something that was very, very, that was something that was such a growing point for me because I was also in a space of burnout and being with the company for 3-4 years. I was thinking about my next phase, and we had a very serious conversation, and I pretty much laid out on the table these are my expectations. I love that I'm being able to do this interim position, but understand that I'm looking for other positions as well. And so if the idea doesn't fall through of me becoming assistant director, I'm taking my business elsewhere, and that is perfectly okay. And he was perfectly okay with that because we have created this relationship. And so
I paid her to say all that, so it's okay.
And it happened to work out, and even in the interim section, I did have a job offer, and I did let them know that I had made prior commitments with Jericho, and I was going to see my commitment through, and that if they were willing to hold on for that offer letter until I completed my commitment with Jericho, then I would be able to, sign on with them. And he came through right in time, and because I know I love Jericho, and I love the opportunity of being able to go back to school and having my educational hours, it just made sense. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So we actually, we're getting to that 5-minute mark, so I don't know if we're going to be able to take a question, but I'm going to say one thing quick and then see if you could jump in. But if you're, hopefully we can stay back a little bit if we want to answer these questions real quick. But if you're part of Relish or Resh, of your mentor or your mentee, can you just stand up really quick for me? So I just want to give a quick shout out to all these guys. You do amazing work. The panel we had today was really around focusing on the work that we do at Relish. So I want to tell people that we have the new application that's out. I believe the due date is July 31st. You can, if you Google Relish Shinny, it'll be the first link that comes up. So please do that. If you want to be a mentor, you can also apply for that through that same link. It's amazing. It's great. If you use my name, it won't help you at all. So please do consider either recommending somebody to apply or you yourself applying for either mentee or mentor. We really need the support. The work that we do is so crucial on the community that we're building. So thank you so much. And with that, we have 3 minutes. So I'm going to continue having the question go.
How you doing? I'm Michael Wells. I'm a program director for Lands and Community Services. I wanted to ask the panel, is there ever going to be a mentorship where people of color can mentor the other cultures of what we need? Because I've been in the rooms now where the black people, we speaking up, but we speaking to us. When are we going to speak to them and get our point across so they'll understand where we're coming from?
I would give to be honest, a short answer. With mentorship programs such as these, then more people of color are in positions that can effectuate the change, and you create the culture, right? So I feel that the more that we have these opportunities and more that you're in the C-suite and senior leadership positions, then you have the opportunity to establish what the room's supposed to look like and what the room's supposed to sound like. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be a specific program that matches this culture, you know what I mean, this race to that race. But as we get into these positions of influence, those opportunities to learn other culture, and I'm saying it nicely, learn our culture, present itself.
Thank you so much. And last but not least.
I'll just be brief. My name is Christian Molieri. I'm a program director for Brooklyn Community Services. And I just wanted to return back, if you could move a little more on asking forgiveness, and the way I interpret that is rather than apologizing, because as a bull in the china shop from the streets of South Philly, from intersectional communities and like radical community organizing, I find myself struggling not to apologize for being a messy, imperfect human and having a human AF moment with my staff and advocating for my staff to manage the burnout of 47 people that are relying on me. And I know that manages that burnout on myself, and I know as a social worker, we can't manage the emotions or reactions of any other individual. However, just given the awarenesses of where I'm coming from and my privileges, I find myself answering to primarily white leadership, and I have great supports from my division director and from everyone else. I haven't been there long enough to know too much about the organization, and I want to ensure that while I'm advocating and trying to scale back on being that bull in the china shop, even at 43, I want to ensure that I'm not putting a target on my back so that I can continue to advocate and do this work. Maintenance blew out like 4 10,000 BTU standalone units, and I'm crawling around the floor doing that. And in April, I took apart a sink at my site. So we do everything, and we move, and we've got 87,000 things, and the expectation is that at the end of the day, we keep these 24/7 programs rolling. So it's just like, that's unsustainable and unrealistic. But the translation of that and in trying to manage that burnout, not like to do for, but to do with and to support, and acknowledging that, I think is really crucial and key. And thank you very much.
Thank you. On that note, I would like to thank my panelists here. Thank you so much for giving your expertise and your experiences. I appreciate working with you guys. And to all of you, enjoy the rest of the conference, and I'll see you at lunch.